In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the process of building this, a VRX module for OpenIPC. Now, if you watched my other video, I showed you me using this in combination with my HDZero goggles. And whilst this isn't the only way to receive the OpenIPC signal, if you're someone who wants to be able to do that with a set of FPV goggles, today, this is the best way forward. Now, in this video, I'm going to walk you through why you want to do it this way compared to others. And then we're going to get on with the process of what you need and how to get it working. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is just explain what the options are for ground stations and why you might want to choose what we're going to do here today. Now, the simplest way to receive the OpenIPC signal is either on a smartphone or laptop with a compatible Wi-Fi adapter. You can then plug that into the USB port. On Android, there is an app available to allow you to view the OpenIPC system on your phone. It works really well. But it does limit you in some ways because A, you can't output this to a display easily or a set of FPV goggles. If you do want to use OpenIPC with a monitor, a display, or a set of FPV goggles, these are the two best options. Now, the first one is this DVR board here. These are available from AliExpress. They're specifically designed for CCTV applications. You can reprogram the ASIC on this to run OpenIPC. And as you can see, this will give you a HDMI output, allowing you to connect it to a monitor or a set of FPV goggles. There is no Wi-Fi built into these, so you're still going to need a Wi-Fi adapter, but there is a bit of a downside to using these boards, and the first of them is the fact that you do need to do quite a bit of work to reprogram them. You need to reburn the firmware on the IC, but the biggest drawback to using these is the fact that they are limited to 60 frames a second. You can't use these DVR boards with the higher frame rate modes such as 90, 100 or 120 frames a second. If you do want to use it on those higher frame rate modes, that is where the Radxa 03W comes in. Now, if you don't know what this is, it's a small single board computer similar to a Raspberry Pi, and basically you program it to run software that will run OpenIPC and output that via HDMI, and you can then plug that into a set of FPV goggles. Now, with regards to building the ground station, you're still going to need a Wi-Fi adapter. Whilst the Radxa does have Wi-Fi on board, it certainly isn't good enough for using with the OpenIPC system, and you will actually use that for the onboard configuration. I've built it into this box, which I found on the group. This allows me to put the Radxa Zero inside, so you can see it located in there. I've then soldered on some wires for my DC input. This board does have some limitations on the power input, so do be careful with it. I actually use mine with a separate regulator externally and power it off a LiPo. And then I also have this switch over here, which is a momentary switch. It's just one I had lying around, and this allows me to activate the onboard DVR. Now, as you can see, I still have the Wi-Fi adapter externally on this. This box is actually big enough to build the Wi-Fi adapter into it, but I'm still using this on the outside at the moment because I'm using this with multiple different systems. But you could build yourself up a really nice and straightforward ground station with the Wi-Fi adapter built in. It's just dependent on how far you want to go. You'll also notice on my Radxa, compared to what you will get, there is a little heatsink down there. This is going to need to keep cool. I've got a fan bolted in there as well, and that is powered off one of the pins. So again, if you do build one of these, do make sure that it does get enough cooling. Now, with regards to using this on goggles, it's got a micro HDMI output. It's compatible with the HDZero goggles, the Avatar HD goggles, or the Orca goggles, all via the HDMI input. If you're using these on the Avatar HD or the HDZero goggles, you can use them on the 100 frames a second mode as well, which is going to give you the lowest latency option. Now, before we get into the setup of the Radxa Zero, one thing I just want to mention is there are several different versions of these boards available. The one I bought is the 03W 2 gig of RAM version with GPIO. You can get them with different amounts of RAM, but you can also get these with onboard storage as well. I personally wouldn't advise to get the one with the storage. Just buy it with the SD card slot. That way you can flash the card and put the files on and do the programming rather than messing around with the onboard storage. With regards to RAM, I would try to get at least the 2 gig version. I don't think you'll have any problems with the 1 gig, but the 2 gig does give you a little bit of headroom. Now, I'm not going to show you how to build this. I've already built mine, but what I am going to walk you through next is how to get this set up from a software perspective. Now, the first thing you need to do to set up the HDZero is download the files. Now, I'll put a link to this page in the description. This is where you not only will find the instructions for what I'm going to walk you through here today, but also the files are located at the bottom of the page as well. You're going to need to download this flash file for the Radxa system. This you would then flash onto your onboard memory or your SD card. As I've mentioned already, I personally recommend using an SD card. To be able to flash that, we'll take a look at it in a minute. I use Blind Etcher. There are a number of different programs that you can use. Also located on this page is all of the information about the release notes, and then you've got a basic overview of how to do this. You should have this up whilst I'm walking you through the process here today, because there are some things that are just easier to read off this than they are going to be on my screen, simply because of the resolution, the display sizes. All of the commands that I'm going to talk about in this video are all available here on this page as well. Now, to flash the SD card or the onboard memory, I recommend you use Blind Etcher. This is available to download for free. This will allow you to flash that image you downloaded from the OpenIPC website. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is flash the image to our SD card. Now, I'm using Blind Etcher for this. I've already downloaded the latest version of the file, so I'm going to double click this. We're then going to select our target, which is our SDXC card listed there, which is H, and then we're simply going to allow that to flash. Okay, so the flash is complete. We now then need to take the SD card and place it into our Radxa. Okay, so I've got the SD card installed in the Radxa in the side here. If you're doing yours bare bones, it's exactly the same. It just wouldn't be in this case. Now, at this point, it is still not ready to use. There is a number of things that you need to configure before it will actually work with your VTX as well as your goggles. Now, to do this, I would recommend connecting it to an external monitor rather than your goggles. I'm going to do it today via a capture card so you can see what I'm actually doing. You could connect it to your goggles at this point for the configuration, but it will be a bit challenging because you're also going to need a keyboard as well, because this configuration is done via the CLI. We're first of all going to do it via the HDMI output, and then we will connect it to my Wi-Fi network here in the workshop, and then we will SSH into it to do the final part of the configuration and the testing before we actually connect it to my goggles. This isn't particularly difficult, but it is a little bit involved. I will walk you through the process in this video, but you are going to need a keyboard, you're going to need a monitor, a TV, or at least if you haven't got them, you're going to need to do it via the goggles, but it will be a little bit challenging. So what I'm going to do first of all is get my keyboard connected via the USB connection. You need to make sure you are using the right one on the Radxa. I'm going to use that one in there. I'm then going to need to connect it to my display via HDMI. I'm going to connect it to a capture card so you can see it. So I'm going to take this cable here and plug that into there, but for you would plug it into your display. At this moment, we don't have the wireless card connected. It's not a problem. The Radxa does have Wi-Fi on board for its configuration. We don't use that Wi-Fi though for connecting to the OpenIPC system. We use the external adapter. So the final thing to do is plug in the power. So what I'll do is I will hop over to that view so you can see what happens when we power it up, and then I'll walk you through the steps to get it up and running. Okay, so I'm going to plug in the power, and what you will see after a few seconds is you'll start to see the command line appear on the display. Next, we need to log in. Now, there are two pre-set up usernames that you can use, root and Radxa. I'm going to use the Radxa one. There are times though where we will need to use the sudo command as a result of that, but I think using the Radxa one is probably the safest way forward. So what we're going to do is log in with Radxa and the same password. And then this will take us to the main command prompt within the Radxa system. Okay, so the first piece of configuration we need to do is resize the partition on the Radxa. Now, to do this, you need to navigate to a folder called config and scripts. This has actually changed on the 1.7 version of the image that I'm using here today. On the older versions, it was actually a different location, but I'm going to show you as it is here. But do check the instructions for your specific image on where you need to do this. They are looking at also automating this process in the future as well, but I'm going to walk you through the manual way. So first thing we need to do is navigate to that folder. So I'm going to type cd // we're going to go to config/scripts. Hit enter, and that takes us to the scripts folder. If I type ls in here, this will list the files that are available, and the file we want to run is the one called resizefs.sh. So to do this, we're going to type ./resizefs.sh, hit enter. When you do this, it may ask for the password again, so I'm just going to type in Radxa and allow the process to run. Once it's complete, it should look like as you see here. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the messages and everything, but what you can see is that the partition allocation table has been altered, and that means we're all done. Next, we're going to move on to configuring the Wi-Fi. This will allow us to connect in via SSH later on, and you won't then need to worry about having a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse connected. To do this, simply type in NMTUI. This is a graphical interface program that will allow you to manually configure the Wi-Fi connections. To do this, we're going to go down to activate a connection. We should then find our Wi-Fi network in the list, so that is that one there, and then you will simply need to input your Wi-Fi key. Once done, click OK, and it should show that it is connecting, and then you can again simply click back, click quit, and then you should be all done. Now, just to make sure that the Wi-Fi is working, you can type nmcli. Once connected, it will show you what connections are available. Do note the IP address that is shown there. You will need that later on for connecting in via SSH. The next thing we need to do is configure the screen resolution for the goggles or the monitor that you intend to use the Radxa with. At the moment, from the factory, it comes preset to 1080p 60. That is fine for the configuration that we've got here. But if you want to use it with the likes of the HDZero goggles, the Avatar HD goggles, we're going to need to change that configuration. Now, to do this, you need to open a script that is in the same folder that I mentioned earlier, which is under the config and scripts folder. We're already in that folder at the moment. So if I type ls again, you can see at the bottom, it shows what is available to run. And what we need to edit is the file that is called screen mode. To do this, we need to type sudo nano. And then we want to type in the name of the file. So it is screen-mode. It's then going to ask us for our Radxa password. It will then open up our Nano text editor. Now, in the top corner, you can see the current resolution that the system is set to, which is 1080p 60. Now, to use it with the HDZero goggles or the Avatar goggles, we're going to want to set this to 720p 100 or 1080p 100. With the HDZero goggles, it's recommended to do it at 720p 100, and that's what we're going to do here today. So to change this, we're going to go up to the text file, and we're going to change this piece at the top. So we're going to change it to 1280 by 720, and we're going to set the frame rate at 100, and then we're going to save. To save this, I'm going to press Control X at the bottom, and it asks us, do we wish to save? So I simply click yes, and that is then the new resolution for the device saved, but that won't kick in until you actually reboot. So don't worry, you won't lose the display that you're currently looking at. Now, as standard, this will come preset to channel 161. So if you're going to use channel 161 on your VTX as well, you don't actually need to change this, but it is worth me showing you how to do this if you need to at this point to allow you to check that it is working. But my advice would be to actually don't change it on this. Make sure that your VTX is set to 161 as well, and that way you won't have any problems. Now, to do this, we're going to need to actually navigate right back to the root directory. So we're going to type cd // and this will take us right back to the root directory of the Radxa. If I type ls now, you can see it shows all of the files, and we need to go into the etc folder. So we're going to type cd // etc, and that takes us into here. We now need to configure this. So again, I'm going to type sudo nano, and it's Wi-Fi broadcast.cfg. Hit enter, and that will then open up the Wi-Fi broadcast configuration file. And if you look in here at the top, you will see that the current Wi-Fi channel is set to 161. I'm not going to change that here today, but if you did need to change it, you would do it there. Now at this point, we do have the option of changing the key. If you don't know what that is, there is a key that goes on your camera and a key that goes on your ground station that allows them to communicate. Now initially when OpenIPC was released, you would actually have to transfer the key for your camera or ground station onto the other, but these days they issue them with a generic key, and the generic key that this comes with should work with the likes of the Runcam Air Unit, the OpenIPC Air Unit as well. So I'm not going to walk you through that process here today. It should work absolutely fine. Now at this point, we're ready to shut it down, reboot. It will then kick in with the new resolution, but also then kick in on our Wi-Fi network, and then we will connect to it via SSH. It's worth making sure that you do have that IP address that I mentioned earlier. If you want to get to that, you can simply type NMCLI, and that will then bring up the network information, and you want to keep an eye on that IP address at the top corner. So for me, it's 192.168.4.129. It should come back to that on reboot, and we're going to need that for logging in via SSH. At this point, I would recommend now connecting it to your new display device that you intend to use, your FPV goggles or whatever display that you're going to use. Note that it will reboot in the mode that you've set with regards to resolution. We are now also going to make sure that we have our RF Wi-Fi adapter connected as well. We will not need our keyboard connected to this for this next part because we're going to be using SSH. So instead, I'm going to plug my Wi-Fi adapter into there, and now we'll connect via Wi-Fi. And then we will connect via SSH, and then we will make sure that it is working with our chosen display. Now, for me to demonstrate this, I'm not actually going to attach it to a set of goggles. Instead, I'm going to continue to show the display on this via my capture card. I actually have reconfigured it back to 1080p 60 to do that, but at this point, you should have it connected to your FPV goggles. Now, once you've powered it back up, you should be seeing this through your chosen display or FPV goggles. Now, it still isn't working at this point, but we now need to connect via SSH and do the final part of the configuration. Now, to connect, we're going to use PuTTY. You can download this if you don't have it installed on your computer. If you remember earlier, we got the IP address, which was 192.168.4.129. So I'm going to click open on that. It's then going to come up with a warning. Mine has just shifted off my recording display. So we're going to have this warning here. I'm going to accept. And then it's going to ask us to log in. So I'm going to log in as Radxa. Same username and password. And then this will basically give us the same command prompt as we had earlier when we were configuring it via the local keyboard. But instead now we're configuring it via SSH over Wi-Fi. Now, just to demonstrate this, what I've got on the far left is the PuTTY connection, and then above me is the HDMI output, so you can see both at the same time. What you see above me is what you should be seeing through your display or FPV goggles. Now, the first thing we're going to do is run a little program that will allow us to check that the VTX connects properly when we power it up. Now, this is called WFB-CLI-GS. When I run this, you will see that on here in a second, we'll get this little box come up. What I'm going to just do is make this a little bit bigger so you can see it a bit easier here. This is currently giving us the status of all of the connections. Nothing is connected at this moment in time. My VTX is turned off, so nothing is showing. But what we can now do is power up our VTX. Now I'm going to use the OpenIPC AIO for this. I'm just going to power that on. You will probably hear the fan kick in, and then we're going to wait sort of 10 to 20 seconds. And as long as everything is connecting properly, we should see a change in that top left-hand box, and it'll start to show that the connection has been received via our ground station and the data rate, and everything is working as expected. There, you can now see that it's kicked in. As you can see up here, we've got our frequency, our channels, our antennas being shown, and it's basically telling us we've got a 4 meg connection, 6.5 megabits a second. Everything is working as expected. Now, to exit this, we're going to just press Control-C. That will exit that app, and then we can next move on to actually testing that our camera connection works. Now, the next thing we're going to do is make sure that we get the actual video connection working as expected. Now, the command for this is available on the instructions on the website. Rather than me type it, I'm just going to paste it in. It is sudo space systemctl space start space openipc.service. Now, when I press enter here, what should happen is our camera view, which is above me, should kick in to the actual view of the OpenIPC camera. So what I'm going to do is hit enter, and then what we will do is type in our password. And what should kick in any second is our camera view. Boom, there it is. You can now see me on the display. That is the actual view from the OpenIPC VTX, and that basically tells us that we have our full configuration working as expected. It is working as it should be, and what we can now do is actually change the settings to now boot the Radxa into this mode moving forward, so you don't have to mess around with this every time you boot it up. Now, one thing to note on this, if your camera view doesn't kick into the video and just stays like you see it above me here, that would usually mean that the resolution and refresh rate that you have set in that file that I said earlier isn't compatible with your display device. There is no warning to tell you that it isn't compatible, but it will just not connect and you will not get the video feed. So if you run the command, which is the start OpenIPC service, and nothing changes and the video doesn't kick in, I would go back and recheck the resolution that you have set, because it probably means that it's not compatible. Now, the last thing for us to do is now stop this so it's not actually running. So we're going to change the command to sudo system control stop openipc.service. And then we have one more command to do, which is set it to run that service on boot. Now, the command for that is very similar, but instead of it being start or stop, it is enable. So it is sudo systemctl space enable space openipc service. If I hit enter, that will now permanently set the OpenIP service to kick in on boot. Now, what you should see when you reboot is it run through the initial setup and then kick straight in to that live video feed. And there we go. You can now see that that is now all up and running. Okay, so that's it from me on this one. Hopefully that has walked you through the process of getting this working. I will say that this process is likely to change in the future. We're probably going to see a hat for the Zero available in the future as well. That will make things a lot simpler with regards to the setup, built-in Wi-Fi adapter, better images, easier configuration. However, this gives you the grounding on how to get it working today, and even if things get simpler in the future, this way you know how to actually do it from scratch. Now, I hope you found this video interesting. If you have, please do consider checking out the links to my Patreon as well as buying me a coffee. It is only through the support of my patrons I'm able to keep making content on this channel. And if you'd like to support us to allow us to keep making content in the future, please do consider checking it out. I want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreons. We would not be able to do this without your support. Now, if you're interested in seeing my video on the RunCam ear unit, there will be a link to that below as well. And I will be soon releasing a video on the OpenIPC ear unit as well. So again, if you're interested in seeing them, please do make sure you are subscribed. Anyway, that's it from me. Stay safe. I will speak to you soon.